Business. Orders of the day.
Ballot item number 41, Order M56, second reading of Bill 56, an act to prohibit certain restrictions on the use of aggregates in performing public sector construction work. Ms. Jones.
The member for Dufferin-Caledon.
Speaker, I move second reading of Bill 56, an act to prohibit certain restrictions on the use of aggregates in performing public sector construction work.
Ms. Jones has moved second reading of Bill 56, an act to prohibit certain restrictions on the use of aggregates in performing public sector construction work. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for her presentation. The member for Dufferin-Caledon.
Thank you very much, Speaker. It's my honor to rise today to debate my private member's Bill 56, the Aggregate Recycling Promotion Act. If I may, I'd like to welcome some guests that are here today to watch the debate on Bill 56. In the members' gallery, we have Jeff Wilkinson and Ashley D'Souza from the Ontario Road Builders Association, as well as Brian Messerschmidt from Aggregate Recycling Ontario, and Dan Muse from the Ontario Stone, Sand and Gravel Association. Thank you for joining us. I'm very grateful that all three of these organizations support Bill 56 and that they are not alone. I've also received support from Bill 56 from a variety of important organizations, including the Ready Mix Concrete Association of Ontario, the Ontario Hot Mix Producers Association, the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association, Mayor Dave Augustine from Pelham, and for my riding of Dufferin-Caledon, the support of Carl Kosak and the North Dufferin Agricultural and Community Task Force. All of these organizations' support is in addition to the many, many comments of support I've received from Dufferin-Caledon and across the province. On that note, I'd like to share one excerpt from an email of support I received from a constituent. It is practically a no-brainer to use recycled aggregates. If they pass the test, they should be used for any construction application which can use them. As an electrician, I worked on construction for almost 55 years and saw millions of tons of concrete poured on hundreds of projects. The applications for recycled aggregate is almost endless, and with the improvement of techniques, new or used, is a moot argument. I love how he phrases it. This brief point sums up well, Speaker, why recycled aggregates and Bill 56 are so important. And I would be remiss if I did not give special thanks to Mayor Bill Hill of Melanchthon in Dufferin County. Mayor Hill's support of Bill 56 has been invaluable, and I appreciate his help. Speaker, the reason I introduced Bill 56 is quite simple. I introduced this bill because right now, in Ontario, there are over 3 million tons of recycled and recyclable aggregates sitting in stockpiles, and more is accumulating every day. But you don't need me to tell you this. You can see it for yourself. Any of you drive along the 401 by the airport recently? Look north. What you are looking at is what Bill 56 is all about. It's just one example of the massive stockpiles of reclaimed aggregates ready to be recycled and used again that are sitting across our province. Aggregate resources are the sand, gravel, clay, stone, and earth that play a crucial role in just about all of the infrastructure around at any given moment of the day. They form the backbone of things like our roads, our subways, our homes, offices, schools, bridges, and hospitals. With a non-renewable resource as widespread as aggregates, it is important, no, critical, for governments to be aware of the resource and the important factors surrounding its use and development. As important as aggregates may be, however, that still doesn't answer the question of why aggregate recycling percentages are so low in Ontario. I found this odd, considering how commonplace recycling has become in so many other different settings. For example, it used to be that once a week the only thing out in front of our homes to pick up was black garbage bags. But nowadays it's more rare not to see the famous blue recycling box in front of our homes because recycling has become so common. I think that's why most people I talk to about this bill are surprised to learn that aggregate recycling is not common practice. Now, over the last number of months, I've received a huge amount of feedback on this bill, and I must say 99% of it has been positive. So you may be asking yourself, what are recycled aggregates? Well, aggregates can generally be divided into primary aggregates, which is sometimes referred to as virgin aggregates, and secondary aggregates, which are the recycled product. Aggregates are considered primary when used immediately after extraction. In other words, they're extracted and then they're put to use in our public sector projects. Recycled aggregates are just that, recycled. So these aggregates that have been reclaimed and are processed to make them eligible to be used again. In short, Speaker, recycled aggregates are basically aggregates like concrete and asphalt material that are reclaimed for various reasons. Most typically, this sort of reclaiming happens during construction or refurbishment projects. With the proper procedures, these reclaimed aggregates can then be processed into recycled. It's important, Speaker, because with such large demand for aggregates in Ontario, if more recycled aggregates were used, it would take away some of the pressure to meet the ongoing demand to find primary aggregates, which of course come from our pits and quarries. So increasing recycled aggregate consumption in Ontario is an important goal and one that should be promoted. I believe that the provincial government should be taking a lead in promoting aggregate recycling, and that is why I have introduced the bill we are debating here this afternoon, the Aggregate Recycling Promotion Act. The reality is that the majority of aggregates are still used in the construction industry, and the largest consumer of aggregates in Ontario by a wide margin is the public sector. I believe that we should be taking a leadership role and demonstrating that recycling is important and that used recycling aggregate in construction work is makes good business practice. Now, currently, across Ontario, there are dozens of public sector bodies like the Ministry of Transportation, for example, that are doing a good job of incorporating recycled aggregates into their construction work. But we can do more, Speaker. Right now, the average recycled aggregate use rate across Ontario is 7%. When you consider that the Ministry of Transportation's average amount of recycled aggregate is approximately 20%, you soon realize that we can do more and we must do more. With the public sector being the largest consumer of aggregates, it only makes sense that if we can increase the usage of recycled aggregates across the public sector, we can have a great impact on the use of recycled product across the province. The appropriate testing procedures and standards already exist to ensure that recycled aggregates are as safe and as reliable as primary aggregates. As I mentioned, Speaker, the Ministry of Transportation has used recycled aggregates for years, and actually their percentages every year keep going up, so they're doing a good job, and I congratulate them on that. Other publicly funded institutions should be striving to include recycled aggregate as well. The major problem, though, is that currently many public sector bodies award construction contracts with the stipulation that only 100% primary aggregate will be considered. That, of course, means that when the tenders are opened, if you have any mention of using and incorporating recycled product, your tender is thrown out and you aren't considered. So what basically happens, Speaker, is a public sector body like a municipality will issue a request for proposal through its standard procurement processes, but stipulate that only primary aggregates can be used. The obvious effect of this practice is that recycled aggregates are not considered for use in many projects. As I looked into this, I remember wondering why, when there seemed to be such a strong consensus that more recycling aggregate could and should be used, there was still so little actually being used. But sure enough, I realized that a big part of the problem is this common procurement process which rules out recycled aggregate from consideration. What Bill 56 will do is end this practice of banning recycled aggregates from being considered. Instead, Bill 56 passage will hopefully lead to a more standardized, science-based approach whereby if a contractor can prove that the recycled aggregates they propose to use meets the necessary standards, then they will be allowed to include them in their proposal. Recycled aggregates have proven to be safe and reliable as primary aggregates. Guidelines for the proper use of recycled aggregates are already in place, were developed in consultation with provincial and municipal engineers, and are set out in the Ontario Provincial Standards and Specifications. There is no reason why someone should be prevented from competing for a contract solely because they propose to use recycled aggregates in their work. If a contractor can show that the recycled product he intends to use meets the standards and required standards, then they should be no issue. If an Ontario business wants to submit a bid to build or resurface a road, then of course they should be able to use recycled aggregates in their proposal. Speaker, this is not something we should be stopping. This is something we should be promoting. Tons of reclaimed concrete and asphalt materials are currently being diverted from landfills to recycling yards, where it is re-engineered for use in many different infrastructure applications. This is a good thing, but with recycled aggregates being banned from so many bids, they end up sitting in stockpiles. Speaker, we all know that when it comes to land use questions in our communities, there are always strong reactions on all sides. This is as true for housing developments as it is for resource extraction operations like pits and quarries. I believe that our job as legislators is to be mindful of all sides and ensure there is a healthy balance between what we want, what we need, and what we can afford. So, at the end of the day, when we know we need aggregates, and we'll always have a demand for them, why wouldn't we promote the use of recycled aggregates and relieve some of the pressure for primary aggregate extraction at the same time? Promoting the use of recycled aggregate in Ontario by passing Bill 56 is the right thing to do, because it is about helping to address our critical need for aggregates, while at the same time helping to preserve the finite supply of land from which we extract it. I sincerely hope all of my colleagues here today agree with me and vote to support Bill 56, the Aggregate Recycling Promotion Act, this afternoon. It's good for the environment, it's good for business, it's good government policy. And I look forward to the debate and hope I was able to convince the members that they can support Bill 56.
Hear, 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 hear. Thank you. Further debate? Further debate? The member for Ottawa South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased today to speak today on Bill 56, the Aggregate Recycling Act, and I'd like to thank the member from Caledon, Dufferin-Caledon. I knew I was going to do that. Dufferin-Caledon for bringing it forward. Thank you very much for correcting me. I just wanted to say that as a new member of the legislature, my first committee assignment was the Standing Committee on General Government, and I got the agenda, and it said report writing, I think ARA, and so little did I know that was the Aggregate Resource Act, and that the committee was reviewing that, and I arrived at committee, and it was evident to me I'd arrived at the end of a very long process that had a lot of people put a lot of hard work into, a lot of effort, and I felt a bit like carpetbagger because there's all this work coming forward. Now my name's going to be on this, and but I'm pleased to be there. And some of the people who worked hard on that bill are, including the member from Dufferin-Caledon. I know I keep doing it the wrong way, and the member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock. I'm glad she didn't sponsor this bill because I never would have got it if I had to do it straight out. And another member from Prince Edward Hastings was here as well. So I know that they consulted extensively and that they traveled extensively. And they also came to my hometown of Ottawa. I learned a few things about Ottawa, that we have the largest number of pits and quarries, which I guess is not surprising in some ways, with such a big land mass. And that we've managed, the municipality of Ottawa has managed quarries and aggregate resources really well, also managed rehabilitation well. Now, all three parties in the legislature have worked together on producing this report, and the committee has heard from a wide range of stakeholders on how we can improve the regulatory regime for our aggregate sector and the management of this important resource that is key to our infrastructure and economic growth. And I know that we all look forward to the report being tabled in the legislature. We can all agree that expanded use of recycled aggregate material is something that we can support and encourage. Some of the benefits the member mentioned today, which is less in landfill, it's good for business. It also helps to extend the life of our quarries and pits so we can better manage those primary resources that we have. And I was pleased this morning that the member mentioned that our own Ministry of Transportation is a leader in terms of using aggregate resources in road building, and that our government encourages the use of recycled aggregate in aggregate applications wherever possible. The use of recycled material in road building grew substantially between 1991 and 2006, from 6 million tons to approximately 13 million tons a year. This represents about 7% of total aggregate production and about 18% of the total aggregates used for transportation and construction. Now, not all recycled materials are appropriate for all applications, in the same way that primary materials are not appropriate for all applications as well. In the right application, we know that recycled aggregates are as good as primary sources. Recycled materials must meet the same Ontario provincial standards as aggregates do from primary sources. Now, in some cases, recycled materials are not locally available, necessitating longer haul distances, so the environmental benefits aren't as great. So sometimes it's not practical for us to use recycled materials. And that's true. That's true. I agree. I agree. Now, if we're going to use recycled content, it's going to require an effective quality assurance program to evaluate the materials, the workmanship, and performance for compliance with specifications, because these materials that we're using are going into crucial infrastructure, roads, buildings, and so we want to make sure from an engineering perspective that these materials are satisfactory. So in the case of some municipalities, they don't have those resources that they require to, and the expertise to make sure that this occurs. So we have to work with our municipalities if we're going to go forward on encouraging them to recycle, to make sure that they have these resources, that they're able to manage this. If you don't have an effective Q&A program, recycled aggregate suppliers are under no obligation to meet minimum standards and may cut corners and reduce costs and increase their competitiveness for work, or rather to increase their competitiveness for work. Now, the Ministry of Natural Resources is considering opportunities to promote and remove barriers to the use of recycled aggregates, such as improving general public and stakeholder education and awareness of recycled aggregate products, encouraging municipalities to consider using and incorporating recycled aggregate products into their own projects and those in their municipality, considering opportunities to make recycled products more cost-effective through pricing tools, and work with partners to establish strategic research priorities and possible funding to support research that moves aggregate recycling forward. I would like to thank the member for bringing this bill forward. Also thank her for the work that's been done in committee. It's not just on the issue of recycled aggregates, but rehabilitation, land use planning. It's a very extensive review, and recycling is an important part of that, and I thank her for that.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Kawartha Lakes, Halliburton, Brock.
Close enough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Only do that to see you.
I'm very accommodating. I'm pleased to rise today to join in the discussion of Bill 56, the Aggregate Recycling Promotion Act, put forward by my colleague from Dufferin-Caledon. I've been fortunate for the past year and a half to be a member of the Committee on General Government, where we have conducted a comprehensive review of the Aggregate Resources Act. During our review, we heard many stakeholders in the aggregate, construction and demolition industries, as well as municipalities and community groups. I want to also welcome the visitors that are with us here today in the gallery. We traveled to a number of locations in the province, visiting several pits and quarries. I think the women almost outnumbered the men in a lot of our tours, which was surprising to our researcher, Jerry Richmond, who did a fabulous job.
Jerry.
So one issue that all members of the committee, regardless of the party, agreed on was the need for aggregate recycling and conservation to be embedded into public policy. And the member from Dufferin-Caledon has risen to the occasion and is proposing this motion today. So the implications of this legislation reach beyond those directly involved in the aggregate industry. The bill, which is appropriately introduced on Earth Day earlier this year, my colleague's very perceptive, will also preserve the land from which the aggregate is extracted. By promoting the use of recycled aggregate, Bill 56 will slow the extraction of primary aggregate and increase the value of recycled resources. Proposals for new quarry sites have been a contentious issue in several areas of the province. I think we've pretty much all experienced that. And increasing our usage of recycled aggregate materials will lessen the demand for new quarries. We have to recognize that aggregate is not a renewable resource, but is definitely a reusable one. Recycled aggregate is safe, reliable, and readily available alternative to primary aggregate sources. And according to the Ontario Provincial Standards specifications, recycled aggregates have been proven to be as reliable as primary aggregates. So if a company can safely and economically complete a project using recycled aggregates, they should be allowed to participate in the request for proposal process for public projects. Ontario businesses should not be left out of the bidding process for public sector projects solely because they propose to incorporate recycled aggregate. But that's exactly what happens across Ontario because of many municipal bylaws which stipulate the projects can only use primary materials. So there's not a valid reason for prohibiting the use of recycled aggregate for public contracts. As my colleague said, 3 million tons of recycled aggregate are readily available in stockpiles across the province. So let's listen to what residents, industry and municipalities have told us, remove the barriers to use this underutilized resource. The member from Dufferin-Caledon has taken an important step forward, making Ontario a leading in aggregate recycling, and I want to support her wholeheartedly and encourage the rest of the legislature to certainly do the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Trinity Spadina.
Thank you, Speaker, and I will be supporting this bill because I think it's a good bill. But you didn't doubt it, I hope. No. We have been working on this issue for quite some time. For a long time, in fact. You forgot to mention me. It's okay. The member from Ottawa South forgot to mention that. But that's okay, because I said when I speak, I'll just remind the folks that I was there. You had it written. This is not a topic that excites people. I understand that. Because as soon as you say aggregate, all of a sudden people watching say, get the channel changes, I get to change the channel. Because the majority of people just don't have a clue what aggregates are. It's true. And so you have to begin the discussion by defining aggregates. Except for the people who are affected by extraction of aggregates, the majority of people just tune off. But the definition of aggregate in the Act is the following: gravel, sand, earth, shale, stone, limestone, dolostone, which is I had to look it up. It's a sedimentary carbonate rock, sandstone, marble, granite rock, or other prescribed material. That's aggregate. And once you define it, you can say, okay, now we can talk about it. I would think. But this topic of recycling is a very important one, because the whole problem of aggregates is that these are limited, non-renewable. It's a limited, non-renewable resource. You cannot continue to plunder the land forever. You can't. And at some point you have to say, how do you slow that down? And the way you slow it down is through recycling. And so we have to commit to greater recycling, and this bill is an attempt to speak to it. But the member knows that we all know that this was the subject of a long discussion in the hearings, because there were many people who appeared before us that said we have to do more of that. In Britain, they recycle much more than we do, and understandably they got a smaller geography there. They have to recycle more, and it makes sense. And I think the rate of recycling there is about 30%, if not much greater. We don't do badly here. And as the member from Dufferin-Caledon pointed out, at the peak, we recycle 20%, at least through the Ministry of Transportation, which is quite good. And it varies from year to year. Some years it was 70%, some years 18%, and at the highest level it was 20%. That's a good thing. So it's something that we can be proud of, obviously, but it also means when we find that only 7% of all of Ontario recycles, that's a low number, and that's nothing to be proud of. And so we need for the ministry to be a leader in this, not just in terms of what it does, but what the ministry and the government ought to do across the broader public sector. And that's really what we're talking about. We need to make sure that recycling becomes part of what the ministry does, part of what it thinks about, and part of what incentives it needs to offer other municipalities or indeed other public sector, the broader public sector, to make sure that we do more of this. And I think the report does that. And to be fair, we've had a good relationship with all three political parties. We worked with the member from Eglinton Lawrence, who was part of that committee as well. We worked as best as we could. There was some disagreement on some areas, but on the whole, we tried, all three political parties, to do our best to come up with better recommendations to deal with the Aggregates Resources Act. And I think when people see the report in a couple of weeks, they will see that good changes have been made. And I know that there will be people who said you could go farther. I know that. But I think this review and what we have done moves the agenda a lot better than where it is at the moment. So what the member's bill does, and she pointed it out very clearly, is that it would prohibit certain restrictions on the use of aggregates in performing public sector construction work. And this is a good thing. And why we haven't done more of that in the past is beyond me, but we can't complain about what has happened. We have to move on and talk about what we need to do from now on. But it is good to have the industry on board. And it is good to point out that the Toronto Road Builders Association, with the assistance of the Ontario Stone, Sand and Gravel Association, developed a best practices guide to promote industry recycling standards for aggregates. And that's a good thing that they have done. When the industry is on board, that's a very useful thing for us all, because it means they're not putting any roadblocks. It means they want to be partners in greater recycling, and that allows the government to go as far as it needs to go to make sure that we recycle a lot more of the aggregates without plundering Mother Earth as much as we sometimes do. And so why is this good? Well, it's good because the current Act, the ARA, does not currently contain specific provisions regarding the recycling or conservation of aggregate. The good thing about doing it is that at individual construction sites, the on-site reuse of recycled materials results in less haulage, which means less disruption to those communities that are affected, and it means that there are cost savings. That cannot be a bad thing. It can only be a good thing. And it means it means savings for public agencies responsible for the maintenance and expansion of public infrastructure. There have been some cities that have led on this, and we need to say that. The City of Toronto has been good at doing recycling. The City of Hamilton has been doing it for a while. Guelph and the regional municipality of York, they accept the use of recycled aggregate materials in their municipal construction projects. And it's good to mention them, because what we want is for other municipalities to jump on board. Now, we understand there are technical difficulties. We understand Peterborough is doing it as well? starting. Well, that's a good thing. But it's good to hear that Peterborough is starting. I mean, well, no,
Order.
if it is true, I wanted to mention it out loud for your benefit, Member Peterborough, so that the people watching say, "What about me?" But it is good that there are other communities that are coming on board. We understand that some municipalities do not have the technical expertise to assess the quality of that recycled material. And if that's the case, it makes it very difficult for them to obviously jump on board. But that's where the government, through the Ministry of Transportation, is able to jump in and say, we can help you. And how do we help you to do that? So we need to, right, I'm glad to hear that. So we need to provide incentives to municipalities to jump on board. We could obviously order that they do it, but that may not be very helpful because they might be upset at that, and there may be some costs that some municipalities may not be able to afford. So we have to, as a government, find the right way to help many of these municipalities that simply do not have the resources or the competence or the expertise to be able to do that. So the report does talk about some of these issues, and this is a good thing. And we recognize that we need to do that. And when people see the report, they will recognize that we have done a fairly good job of making recycling a reality in this province. The provisions contained in Bill 56 are very, very good. I think, obviously, we have to send it off to committee to get a better sense from many about what the good, what the positives are and what the negatives are. And if there are negatives, we should know what they are. I personally don't see any, but there's some people who are saying that that if we use recycled material, that the prices may go up, and we should talk about that. Could prices jump up in a way that is artificial as opposed to real? And so that's something we might look at, and I'm sure there would be people who would be interested in talking to that. And with respect to incentives, it would be good to have municipalities and others come forward to tell us what kind of help do they need, and what kind of leadership are they expecting from the province that would make sure that many of these municipalities are not left behind, but they can come on board as quickly as they can. By doing this, we will alleviate some of the fighting that goes on with each and every aggregate extraction that happens in our communities. And it doesn't matter where it is. Wherever it is, whether it's on prime land, and we heard from many people saying it shouldn't happen on prime land. It shouldn't happen in the Niagara Escarpment. And many communities say it shouldn't happen anywhere. And there are many communities who say if it goes below the water table, we shouldn't be extracting rock whatsoever, even though we've been doing it for a while. And many say that environmental assessments have been done, and therefore it's okay. But people have concerns about water, and right they are, because there are cumulative effects of extraction in many communities that could affect and do affect and does affect the water, and we need to worry about that, and people are worried about that. So we touch on that in the report. So I think people will be able to see that we have done our best, all three political parties, to advance the agenda on this review, but particularly as well on recycling. So I'll be supporting this bill. We think it's a good bill, and it's for that reason that we mention the member from Dufferin-Caledon in our bill as a way of saying this is okay. So we look forward to debating the review as soon as it comes forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Further debate? The member for Eglinton Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that the member from Trinity Spadina mentioned that we had a very good learning experience as MPPs as we traveled across the country as part of the Aggregate Review Committee. And I know the member from Dufferin-Caledon was on the committee, as well as the member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock. We went, it was the first time, I think, in the history of this legislature that members of the legislature actually visited quarries and aggregate sites right across the province. We went even to Manitoulin Island to check their unique extraction method on the island, but they ship everything by ship through the Great Lakes and so forth. And we went to the huge ones in Caledon. We were in some restored sites too that have been made fertile again and green. So we learned a lot as MPPs, and I thought the member certainly from Dufferin-Caledon really had a real sincere interest in the committee looking at the increased use of recycled aggregates, recycled material in road building, etc. And this makes, ultimate sense, good sense to do this. Because when you use the recycled materials, you take the pressure off of new virgin land that doesn't have to be basically used as a pit. And you also take the pressure off the road infrastructure. The municipalities claim that there is a lot of truck traffic, a lot of dust, a lot of noise as a result of the aggregate extraction across the province. But as the member from Trinity-Spadina will tell you, the reality is that we need to have aggregate. I used to ask people in my riding, they would have big stone houses, and in front of their lawn they'd have a sign say, "Stop the mega quarry." And I say, well, where did the stone come from your house? And your pool in your backyard, where did this concrete come from your pool? And building the school or the hospital or the new road that you want along the 407, it comes from Ontario Aggregate. So the reality is we have to protect our farmland, we have to protect our water courses, our aquifers, but we also have to understand this is a vital industry for Ontario. It's a vital natural resource that should be protected because it's not limitless, certainly not in southern Ontario, especially when it has the adverse effect as it could have, the members from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes will tell you about her issues. The member from Caledon will tell you about the trucks and the extraction issues. So this is part of the solution. She has brought forward, the member from Dufferin-Caledon, part of the solution. It's a very pragmatic step forward that I would encourage all members of both sides of the House to support, because it means that we start using material that's been taken from the cities and other former road sites or whatever, and it's reused again. And MTO, the Ministry of Transportation, has proven you can do it. They've been using recycled aggregates for about 40 years. MTO, we found out, uses about 20% of recycled aggregates in their road construction. 20%. The sad thing is municipalities are lacking in using recycled aggregates. They all say, well, our engineers don't like recycled aggregates. And we ask them why. Well, back in 1962, there was a road that wasn't up to par because they used recycled. Well, the new technology, the testing that is done, the new demands made on quality control make recycled aggregates very appropriate, very safe, and of high standards. So if MTO can use it on their superhighways, there's no reason why municipalities can't start to use it. The member said some of the municipalities are, like Toronto and Guelph and others, but not enough. Municipalities, I think, are only using about 3%. And the municipal leaders came to the committee, and we asked each one, how much recycled aggregates do you use? They had no idea. Well, our engineers don't know, we don't know, we'll look into it. I don't know if they ever got back to you. Or I don't know, they were playing dumb. So we said, you know, you could save money, you could take the pressure off farmland by using recycled aggregates, you can create jobs in recycling, but the municipalities generally have been very opposed to using recycled materials. So the question is the carrot or the stick.
Thank you.
Oh, I was talking about the carrot up there. Just getting to the carrot.
Further debate, the member for
Kitchener-Conestoga.
Kitchener-Conestoga.
Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in support of Bill 56, the Aggregate Recycling Promotion Act, with which my colleague, the member of Dufferin-Caledon, has tabled earlier this year. In fact, the member and I have spent a lot of time together, in fact, reviewing the Aggregate Resources Act in committee over the last year. And I've witnessed her commitment to this issue. In fact, we'll call her our little rocks star on this issue. Her determination to bring forward a legislative reform that would save taxpayers money, create jobs, and protect our environment. So I'd like to thank the member for her hard work on this important bill. As I mentioned last year, when I traveled across the province as part of the Aggregate Resource Act review group, I had the opportunity to hear from many residents, municipal officials, and industry representatives. And everywhere I went, I always heard the support for using more recycled materials for public sector projects. Still, there are a number of roadblocks, though, preventing this practice in the public sector. In fact, many municipalities stipulate that they will not accept bids from companies that use recycled aggregates, and that is just not right. I am sure we can all agree that public sector projects should not be limited by requirements specifying that virgin or primary aggregates be used in construction, especially when recycled aggregates have been proven to be just as safe and reliable. And I hope we can also all agree that no company should be prevented from bidding on contracts simply because they want to use recycled aggregates during construction. Well, we have the power to start that process to reform these two problems today by voting in favor of the Aggregate Recycling Promotion Act. Bill 56 would ensure that recycled aggregates are fairly considered for all public sector construction and that no company is barred from this work just because it uses recycled aggregates. With more than 5 million tons of recycled aggregate materials stockpiled around the province, taking this action just makes sense. These resources could be put to good use in a way that saves taxpayers money and stimulates growth in the recycling industry while protecting our environment. That's why, as PC environment critic, I am particularly pleased with Bill 56. It creates the right economic conditions to allow companies operating in a free and open market to deliver real results for our environment. At a time when our province ships roughly a third of our waste, or 4 million tons, to the United States every year, we need substantive policy changes like Bill 56 to improve overall waste diversion. And with this in mind, I would encourage all members in this House to vote in favor of Bill 56. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Further debate, the member for Leeds-Grenville.
Well, thank you, Speaker. It's a pleasure to join in the debate for Bill 56, the Aggregate Recycling Promotion Act, introduced by my colleague, the member for Dufferin-Caledon. It's a bill I'm proud, Speaker, to say I support. Ms. Jones has done an exceptional job in outlining all the details of the legislation and why it's a good bill, so I won't spend my time recycling her comments. That was okay. That worked okay. So I do want to talk about a company in Leeds-Grenville, though, George Tackaberry and Sons, which celebrated its 55th year in business last year. I'm pleased to call George a friend, and you won't find a business owner in Ontario that cares more about his employees or his community. And his equipment has built and maintained countless roads in the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, but it's really his heart and his generosity that has helped make the communities dotting those roads the places that my constituents love to call home. So I could go on and on about him, Speaker, but I'm going to identify some points in Bill 56. And I know that there's no single piece of legislation, and certainly not a private member's bill, that can settle the emotional debate about aggregate extraction. However, I want to compliment the member for Dufferin-Caledon. She's done a remarkable job in Bill 56 to bring forward a thoughtful and balanced proposal to help meet Ontario's demand for aggregate. And the growing demand for stone, sand and gravel is a good thing. It's something all of us, if we're truly committed to getting the province's economy back on track, is what we want. You can't grow the economy without aggregate, Speaker. Roads and bridges and, yes, subways just don't get built with thin air. To meet the demand, Bill 56 creates an opportunity to use more recycled aggregate in public construction projects, and as a number of speakers have said earlier, we know that there's 3 million tons of recycled aggregate now stockpiled across the province. So I do want to give credit to the heads of the Ontario Stone, Sand and Gravel Association, the Ontario Road Builders Association, the Ready Mix Concrete Association of Ontario, the Ontario Hot Mix Producers Association, and the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association, who stated in a joint letter to all of us here in the Legislative Assembly, I'll just give you one quote, "We know that incorporating recycled aggregate into construction projects makes good environmental and economic sense." So that's the quote. Both sides of this debate see Bill 56 as a common sense, practical way to alleviate the pressure on primary aggregate and the land it comes from. So I'm going to ask everyone to consider, when they're getting ready to vote on this, some of the issues that we deal with in this place, some of the divisive and emotional issues, the challenge that the member had to draft a private member's bill that's doing some substantive work by people who, quite frankly, sometimes can't decide on what the color of the sky is. At least you know with me, I'm always going to say it's blue. But you know what? In this bill, the member has really addressed a need, and I hope and I pray that all members will support Bill 56. Congratulations to the member for Dufferin-Caledon. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Burlington.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'd also like to thank the member from Dufferin-Caledon, who has also been a mentor to me personally as well. I rise to speak to Bill 56, the Aggregate Recycling Promotion Act. If enacted, Bill 56 would prohibit any public sector person or body in Ontario precluding the use of secondary aggregates in public sector construction work. This is not to say that there aren't already public sector bodies currently incorporating recycled aggregate into their construction work. The Ministry of Transportation is a prominent beacon of hope in this regard, but we can always do more. It begins with changing the way we frame the process. Many, if not most, municipalities specify as part of their RFP process for construction work that only 100% virgin material will be considered. The results of this is a bid process tilted towards primary aggregates. That boosts market demand and means more quarries. The Government of Ontario and the MUSH sector, municipalities, universities, schools and hospitals, represents the largest user of aggregate in this province. Using recycled aggregate obviously eases the burden on our environment. This is why the measures proposed by Bill 56 can have such a positive effect. The fact is that quarries have a huge impact on their host communities, and they are vigorously resisted. The Nelson proposal in the shadow of Mount Nemo or the enormous Highland mega quarry are two recent examples. And while we need aggregate for new construction projects, the aggregate itself does not need to be new. As Bill 56 points out, there are more enlightened solutions available to us, so I am very happy to support this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The member for Dufferin-Caledon, you have 2 minutes for 225.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. I very much appreciate the feedback that I've received on Bill 56. You know, there's a joke in my office that I have no shortage of ideas. Some of them are great ideas, some not so much. But the reality is, whether I have the idea or not, I need other people to implement it. So I want to particularly thank, in legislative research, Jerry Richmond. He was our researcher for the ARA, but Jerry and I have spent a lot of time on the phone in person talking about rocks, and I've really enjoyed his counsel. The other person is my executive assistant. Kevin Weatherby has worked hours and hours and hours preparing the background material to make Bill 56 a good piece of legislation. I am very proud of what we've been able to bring forward for debate. I really do believe that it will actually make a positive change and can improve the situation in Ontario. And I just want to thank Kevin for all the work that he did preparing for this debate this afternoon. So thank you very much.